All right, happy Friday, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is episode, can you believe this? This is going to be episode 692 of Extreme Health Radio. Amazing. We started this show back in 2012 when there was very few podcasts out, and now there's millions of them, which is great. Competition is good, but I also think it's really just amazing that we have more options for people to listen to health information aside from the mainstream news. So I'm really happy you guys joined us. I'll put links to everything we talk about. Let me turn this volume down a little bit. Everything we talk about on today's show at extremehealthradio.com/692. So that's all you got to remember, extremehealthradio.com/692. I'll put links to Morley's website and any other topics that we discuss, as well as our sponsors as well. So thank you again for joining us. If you're new to the show, we do shows every single Friday morning at 10:45. We're not live anymore because of what's going on. We've gotten a lot of emails from people asking, why aren't you live anymore? And the reason is, I was telling Morley before the show, is that the censorship issue. So we have to make sure that we protect, and if we have to edit any content before it goes up on the YouTube, otherwise they're just going to shut us down. So that's why we're not live anymore. I think there's some other live streaming options coming up soon, which we'll look into. But, you know, this is kind of cool too. So Morley Robbins is here. We're going to talk about copper. We're going to talk about anemia. We're going to talk about minerals. And we were talking about before the show that, I just feel like his work is so important and so foundational. And it's the alternative health information. Like, there's not a lot of places where you're going to get this type of information because, frankly, it's dangerous because it cuts into products, people selling products. And, we're after the truth, and we want to know, if, certain minerals are key and that conflicts with our current understanding, we'll stop selling the products, So it's really important, I think, for people to realize that. And so we're going to talk about copper today. Next week, we got our biological dentist, Dr. Stuart Nunley, on the show. He just did a workshop for the Extreme Health Academy. Morley Robbins has done a workshop for the Extreme Health Academy. He was nice enough to do that. Then the Friday after that, we have Cass Ingram. We're going to talk about the medical injection. I don't even want to use the V word, but we're going to talk about that. And then Dr. Michelle Lamassa Schrader will talk about recall healing and all kinds of cool stuff coming up. So make sure to subscribe to the show. That way you don't miss anything that we have going on. And another cool thing too, if you subscribe, is that you can imagine we've done 691 other episodes that you may have never heard of before. So what we're doing now is we're doing our live or our new shows on Sunday night. So on Sunday evening, around 9 or 10 Pacific, we're uploading our brand new shows. And then the other 6 days of the week, you get our best of content from years gone by, which is still completely relevant. So you get shows 7 days a week if you subscribe. So make sure to do that so you don't miss anything that we have going on. And if you guys, I think this is the 9th time that Morley's been on the show. And I don't know if we've had anyone else. Maybe Adam Bergstrom has been on 9 times. But his work is so important, guys. And if you don't know who he is, he received his BA in biology from Denison University in Ohio. He is the founder and creator of the Root Cause Protocol. He is a wellness coach, nutritional counselor, and a functional diagnostic nutritionist. He's known as the Magnesium Man, but he's also been called the Iron Man. So he's founded the Magnesium Advocacy Group, which is gotmag.org, back in 2012, which is when we started the show. Crazy. And now I think that has over almost probably 200,000 members on Facebook. So make sure to subscribe to him on Facebook. And let me bring him on and turn his audio up so that you all can hear him. And there we go. Mr. Morley, how are you, my friend?
Jason, I'm doing great. Good. Justin, excuse me. Justin, it's great to be here. It's been, it feels like it's been forever since we had that special program, but I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
Yeah, and we're kind of talking a little bit before the show about this idea that, in the alternative health, there's definitely a mainstream alternative, right? And that's kind of what you get from a lot of podcasts. And I know you do a lot of radio shows getting the word out about your work. And what we're after, and you and I both are, what's the alternative, because the alternative is, promoting zinc and promoting silver and promoting vitamin D and all these things, right? And we're definitely not about that.
No, I think that there's a lot of misinformation out there, a lot of misunderstanding about how these minerals and vitamins really work, and the research is very confusing, as we've discussed. It's very misleading, and the average person just doesn't have the time or the wherewithal to really separate the wheat from the chaff. And that's why I really value these conversations, so we can get into the weeds of it and help people make that understanding clear about why they should be doing certain things and why they should be avoiding other things. So it's a never-ending process.
So let's give a brief little rundown, because like I mentioned before, I think this is like the 9th time you've been on, but there's always new listeners, and being introduced to your work. So let's give just a brief little overview of the root cause protocol as quickly and succinctly as possible. And then we're going to get into copper and kind of dive into that a little bit more, but let's give a little overview for people.
Yeah. So for those that may not know, I was in the hospital field for 32 years, and over a frozen shoulder was introduced to natural healing, which was it was a very painful experience, but the recovery was amazing. But it got me to wake up that there's other ways to heal than through traditional, conventional allopathic medicine. And for some reason, I was drawn to minerals. I was initially drawn to magnesium as I was reading Carolyn Dean's The Magnesium Miracle. Great book if anyone hasn't read it. It helps to connect a lot of dots. And for some reason, I didn't stop there. I just kept digging. And I kind of almost treat it like a nautilus. If you can visualize a nautilus in your mind, at the outer edges of the shell was magnesium, and then that got me to copper, and then I realized that copper comes in 2 flavors, usable and not usable. And when it's usable, it has amazing ability to regulate iron. And then I came to realize why we have this magnesium loss is because if you don't have the bioavailable copper, iron builds up in the body, and it causes oxidative stress. And oxidative stress causes magnesium loss in the cell. And what my work is really evolving around is, how do we make energy efficiently? What's the optimal mix of nutrients we need? And it's not a lot. We do need magnesium. We do need bioavailable copper. We need vitamin complexes, not like the ones that are typically sold in supplement bottles, preferably from food. But it's a constant challenge to make sure we're getting the best that Mother Nature has to offer, because there really is a blueprint that runs our body, that runs our metabolism. I would go so far as to call it the immuno metabolism, because the immune system and the metabolic activity they're flip sides of the same coin. And as we've discussed on numerous occasions, there's a very important protein that is involved with copper, and it's called ceruloplasmin, and it was first described in 1948. And it's unique in our body in that it carries or has 8 copper atoms inside it. There's no other protein like it. It's one of the largest proteins in the body with 1,066 proteins. But what's particularly unique is when it's expressing itself as designed by our maker and Mother Nature, it emits a blue color. And it's called the blue protein. And as it turns out, the blue protein runs the blueprint. And the literature is very clear about it. It's just not taught in doctor school. And this isn't just allopathic. This is homeopathic, naturopathic, chiropractic. These basic principles about how oxygen is regulated on the planet. Again, oxygen being the second most reactive element on the planet after fluoride. So it's really a toxin. And we need to be really respectful of that. And the only metal and the only element on planet Earth that can work with oxygen, harness oxygen, activate oxygen is copper. Yes, iron does carry it, but iron's very passive about it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious about those 8 atoms that you said that were inside the ceruloplasmin protein. What are they there for? Do we know?
That's the brains of the outfit. Now, what's important for the listeners to understand is that this protein has changed since 1948. So
Hmm.
from 1948 to the mid 70s, there were 8 proteins, and then from the mid 70s to about 2000, there were 7 copper atoms, and then 2000 to the current day, they say there's between 6 and 7. They're kind of equivocal. And the question that I've asked a number of copper researchers is, where are these atoms of copper going?
Yeah.
And of course, I get met with silence. And so there's been a structural change in this protein within our lifetime.
That's so
And
bizarre. So there's no
well,
other
it is
protein that
bizarre.
has that many copper atoms in it?
Well, the only one that would come close would be lysyl oxidase.
Okay.
And for the listeners who don't know what that is, if we didn't have lysyl oxidase, we'd just be a big bag of fluid. And so lysyl oxidase is what knits collagen and elastin together to give our tissue integrity.
Okay.
So it's what's behind all bone, all connective tissue, tendons and ligaments, and
Interesting.
all the fascia that holds our body together. All of the blood vessels are made with lysyl oxidase. So it's not an insignificant protein. And I've seen references where it has as many as 10 copper atoms. But again, it's Justin, it's like they took the Encyclopedia of Copper, and around sometime between the First and Second World War, they blew it up into 1,000 parts.
Mm.
And nobody has the encyclopedia anymore. And so I'm just, patiently gathering information, and nowhere near do I have all of the information, but I have enough to know that we've been misled and we've been misfed, and that's why we're all struggling with fatigue, why we're all struggling with chronic disease, and it's really a dance between magnesium, copper, and iron, and ceruloplasmin,
Hmm.
and this is not openly understood nor taught in doctor school, as I said.
Hmm. So it's interesting. So we know for sure that copper is the only metal that can deal with iron. Are there
Yep.
any other metals that can deal
No.
with iron? Or?
No, and when we have to be really careful when we say deal with it. So iron exists in a lot of different states, but the two that are the most important are ferrous iron and ferric iron.
Hmm.
So ferrous is highly reactive, and it has a valence of +2, and ferric iron has a valence of +3. So everyone's scratching their head going back to high school biology and chemistry, like, oh man, I remember that. But the important thing is that it's the ferric iron that can be connected with proteins,
Okay.
especially transferrin protein and ferritin, which is a storage protein, as you know.
Hmm.
And it's the ferrous form of iron that is involved in hemoglobin in our red blood cells.
Okay.
It's the ferrous form of iron that carries oxygen in our blood. Just like a waiter carries food in a restaurant, ferrous iron is carrying oxygen to our tissue so that it can be used by mitochondria to make energy.
So
And
when
we couldn't.
people so when people are talking about iron, like we mentioned before, there's the alternative health and then the alternative health, right? So when people in the alternative health world talk about iron, they're generally considered to be some people think it's a good thing. And so when they are talking that way, are they talking about the literature they've read about the ferrous iron?
Well, again, we can't live without iron. You
Yeah.
know, it's like a you can't make a skyscraper without iron. It's got to have
Hmm.
steel, right? And I think the mistake that's made is that I truly believe that there are practitioners who, to draw the analogy of the steel in a construction site versus the iron in our body, picture that construction site. And the prevailing thought is that the steel drives itself to the construction site. The steel unloads itself and stores it where where it can be parked.
Mm-hmm.
That the steel can go into the foreman's office and read the blueprint and know where it's supposed to be used. That the steel can pick itself up 30 stories and then can perfectly place itself and then weld itself into place. And I think there are practitioners who honestly believe that iron does that inside our body. That this iron all by itself, when in fact we know at a construction site, there are hundreds of gifted artisans and craftsmen working with that steel. If you've ever seen a big construction project, you know how many talented people need to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
But we get distracted by the steel and we tend to ignore the workers. Well, the exact same thing is happening inside our body. The steel, the iron, very important. There's like 4,000 to 5,000 milligrams of it, and there's about 90 to 100 milligrams of copper. And so the analogy that's actually used in homeopathy, which I think is relevant, is they refer to copper as the general, and they refer to iron as the foot soldier. And that's an analogy because, I'm not a military guy. I've never been in the army or anything like that. But we've seen enough war movies that we know that when the general says let's go left, everybody goes left, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And only one general has to say it. You don't need to have 5,000 generals tell 5,000 foot soldiers. You just need one.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the analogy holds, and the confusion arises in that iron is important, but what has been kept behind the curtain of awareness is who's regulating the iron, who's circulating the iron, who's making sure that the iron is in its appropriate state. One of the important functions of iron is involved in DNA replication. It's a really big deal. And iron is involved in that process. And what I just read a few weeks ago is that, in fact, copper is what keeps iron in the right valence so that it can do its work inside DNA replication. And yet all of the attention is given to iron, and copper is pushed to the side and kept in the shadows. And that is a pervasive pattern in the research, and it has been that way for about a century.
So how do we know that, you mentioned on one of our previous shows that if you take your age and multiply it by 365, you get some astronomical number. And I think with mine, I'm 45, so you get like 16,000 or something. So,
right.
So my body theoretically has 16,000 milligrams of iron. And where do we get the number that you said before that we should have around 5,000? Where do we get that from?
Just reading scores of literature, and there is no single number. It's just as I've looked at it and seen different scholars and different iron biologists, it seems that the number 4,000 for women and 5,000 for men seems to have a consistency across the literature. Where I came up with the idea of the 1 milligram for every day on the planet, your age times 365, is a conversation with one of the world's foremost authorities in iron. His name is Robert Crichton. He's in the Netherlands. And a couple of years ago, as I was nearing my 65th birthday, and I was just so impressed with his research, I called him up and thanked him. And I said, I have a favor. He said, well, sure. What is it? I said, I'd love to get an autographed copy of your latest textbook, because his textbooks are used in medical schools and graduate schools all over the planet. And he said, I would be honored. And then he proceeded to say something that really left quite an impression on me. He said, Morley, you do understand that every day we're on this planet, we're accumulating another milligram of iron. And I said, yes, sir, I don't know that from your work. And that's where that 1 milligram a day comes from.
Wow.
And
Yeah, I looked on Amazon, Morley. His book Iron Metabolism is $162.
yeah. So, and
Wow.
not only did he sign it for me, he he spent an enormous amount of money shipping it to me. I mean, he's just a really generous guy.
Wow.
And he probably doesn't even remember that encounter now. But
Hmm.
it meant the world to me to have a chance to thank him for his body of work. I mean, it would be hard to describe his importance to the world of iron biology. I mean, he's just a brilliant mind, and he's not the only one. There are others like Jamie Collins at the University of Florida, or Gutteridge and Hallowell, or Douglas Kell, who I've also spoken to with Manchester University. I mean, these are all really important figures in the field of iron,
Hmm.
but they don't have sway in clinical circles
Mm.
because in medical schools, there's two sides to a medical school. There's a research side and there's a clinical side, and they don't cross.
Hmm.
And so they may have really talented researchers with huge breakthroughs in understanding, but that is not getting into the classroom. And then the adage that's used in healthcare is that it usually takes about 40 years to get from the bench to the bedside with a new idea.
Yeah,
An
I've heard that.
example would be when they discovered that ulcers were caused by H. pylori.
Uh-huh.
That took 40 years for that to finally be incorporated into mainstream clinical understanding.
Do you
So
think, Morley, it's possible to, assuming we can do the right testing, and I know you've talked a lot about testing, and it's really difficult to find, to do accurate tests of iron being stored in tissue and iron being stored in liver. But let's just snap our fingers and assume that we could do that kind of testing. Do you think it would be possible for someone like me, who theoretically has 16,400 milligrams of iron in my body, to get me down to 5,000? Is that possible?
that's a wonderful question. Um, in part, the getting you to do the arithmetic is there's a certain shock value. What's the prevailing meme on planet Earth? You're anemic and you're copper toxic.
Mm-hmm.
That if you go to any mainstream or alternative website, those are the phrases you're going to see. If you're going to look at iron, it's going to be about you don't have enough, and if it's about copper, you've got too much.
Mm-hmm. Always.
And always. And so I'm a curious George, and so I started to pick at that. Is that really the case? And so I think the reason for the 16,000, that shock value, is getting you to say, well, wait a minute, I thought I was anemic, and you're telling me I've got too much. And that's exactly what it does. Is it takes people out of this kind of sleepy state that occurs on the internet, and gets you to say, wait a minute, maybe there's more to the story. That's the most important thing for people to realize, is that there is more to the story about how we make energy. And when energy isn't being made optimally, that's when chronic conditions start to build.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely E equals MC squared. That famous formula that Einstein came up with: energy equals mass times the speed of light.
Mm-hmm.
But inside our body, what it's really referring to is structure times function. As soon as the energy production of the mitochondria begins to wobble, the structure and function of cells begins to change. And I found an article just yesterday talking about that very fact as it relates to sleep apnea. And it's the structure and function of the cells in our throat and mouth begin to change because of a lack of energy production in our airway. And it's amazing when you think about this.
So interesting.
Again, we're familiar with the phrase form follows function. Well, that's a more simplified description of E equals MC squared. Form follows function.
Mm-hmm.
And so if the function's changing, well, then the form is going to change. And that's exactly what happens.
So I'm curious a little bit more to learn a little bit more about what you call the reticulo endothelial system. What you like to say, it's iron recycling, right?
Yeah.
um,
Do you get a bonus for saying it in a formal way?
well,
There
it's
must
funny
be
because I
some
was trying to remember what that
incentive.
was. It's so technical.
Well,
So,
reticulo means that there's a grid.
uh-huh.
Reticulo means grid. So
Okay.
think of just a mesh. That's what reticulo is referring to.
Okay, so what is like the life cycle? Because correct me if I'm wrong, and I have a very basic understanding of what this is supposed to be doing, but the iron is supposed to be shuttled via some key enzymes and key proteins back to the bone marrow and to create new red blood cells. But the problem is that there's too much iron, and then the iron that we have isn't necessarily shuttled there because of lack of those enzymes, and then we get this tissue buildup of iron, and then as a result of that, you have oxidation because of the oxygen we're exposed to, and then tissue breakdown. Am I missing anything there? I'm sure I'm missing a lot.
Well, no. Actually, you've got all of the big strokes, but keep in mind we're talking about one of the most complicated mechanisms of human physiology. Again, it's every second we're making 2 million red blood cells. So we've been talking now, I don't know how many minutes. So let's take it, let's say it's 15 minutes times 60 times 2 million.
Wow, I can't even do that. It's
That's
too high.
what I know, but it's a big number, right? But every second we're alive, we're making 2 million red blood cells. So that puts a lot of pressure on the body to maintain that. And it takes about 2 days to, to create what's called an erythroid precursor cell and have it mature into being a full-fledged erythrocyte. And it goes through different stages. It's like, think of, again, go back to high school biology where we had the little guppies that became, the frog and things like that. So there's a very precise process that it goes through. But to pick up on your comments, the real big touch points in this recycling program, and again, let's use some broad numbers here. We have 250 billion red blood cells in our body. About 25% of our cells are red blood cells. We have 100 trillion cells, and so 250, or excuse me, 25 billion are 25, yeah, 25 trillion are red blood cells, and we lose about 1% of those cells a day. Every 24 hours, we've got to replace a lot of red blood cells. And again, these numbers are ridiculously big. And the three critical points are the bone marrow, where they're called nurse cells, like in the hospital, nurse cells that hatch these erythroid precursor cells. And then we have the liver is where iron can be stored, can also be broken, the red blood cells can be broken down in the liver. But the principal site for breaking down red blood cells is the spleen. And there are cells called macrophages. Those are like Pac-Man. And in the spleen, those macrophages are called red pulp macrophages. And the spleen just loves copper, can't do its job without copper. The liver is a storage depot for copper and retinol and iron and 500 metabolic functions. And I'm sure there are other nutrients, but those are some really important ones in the liver. And then the bone marrow has a constant supply of iron that is attached to a key protein called transferrin. And transferrin means transport iron. Trans for transport, ferrin It's a protein that has iron attached to it, and each transferrin has 2 atoms of iron, ideally. But it has to be in a +3 valence for it to work. Well, the iron coming out of the spleen, the macrophages of the spleen, is in a +2 state. And it needs to be oxidized and turned into a +3 state. And that's the job, one of the many jobs, of ceruloplasmin. That blue protein has many different enzyme functions, but the one that really matters here is called ferroxidase. Ferro for iron, oxidase, again, oxidizing. And that enzyme is a doorman that opens up the back door to the macrophage to allow the iron out and attach it to the transferrin protein. And when the ferroxidase enzyme is being expressed, it accelerates this process. So it's really doing 3 things. One, it's opening the door, it's accelerating the release, and it's making sure that it's in the right form so it can attach to transferrin. And then transferrin is off on its way to go to the bone marrow.
You know what's,
And
Morley, as you're describing this, I'm trying to envision, and I'm sure our listeners are too, like in a sort of diagram, or I'm trying to, envision this happening inside the body. I know that you have an awesome platform, a membership site, and a membership community with amazing people in it. Are there any pieces of content that does like a diagram, maybe a computer simulated model of how this works so that we can get a visual grasp of this? Because there'd be no way for me to remember all that. I can't remember that.
There's no computer simulation. There's for people who are in the RCP community, we regularly talk about it. We have presentations, and for the people who go through the training, the 16-week training program, there's a very deep dive around this and lots of PowerPoint material to explain it. But you're raising a really exciting idea of somehow trying to capture this in a way so that people understand it, because where the real breakdown, you're touching on the very the most sensitive part of this whole dynamic is there's a misunderstanding in the fact that, and this goes back to 1952 was where it was first identified by Max Weintraub at the University of Utah. There's a misunderstanding about where we get the iron for this recycling system. And when push comes to shove, we need 25 milligrams of iron every day. And 24 of those 25 milligrams, those are not my numbers, this is Max Weintraub, thank you very much, backed up by people like Gunther Weiss in Switzerland, and Goodnight and Gutteridge and Howell. I mean, this is the big names all agree on this. But there's 24 of those 25 milligrams. 95% of the iron that's needed each and every day comes from the recycling system. 5%, 1 milligram, comes from our diet. And what's happened is that truth that was written up in an article in 1952 has now become lost. And now we're taking supplements where we might be getting anywhere from 18 milligrams by mouth. I was just doing a consult last night in class with one of the students who, when she was pregnant, took a supplement that had 350 milligrams of iron each and every day while she was pregnant. And that isn't, oh my God. But again, we've been conditioned in this country especially to think we can't get enough of iron. We need more because we're anemic. We're all anemic. We know that. And there has been there's been a brainwashing program of the highest order, and people don't realize that we were designed to get iron from our mother, and we recycle it daily, and we just need a minimal amount from our diet. To give you an example of how distorted the diet can be, take a bowl of Cheerios. Now, when you have a bowl of Cheerios, do you have a half a cup as the serving size on the side of the box, which says that you're going to get 18 milligrams of iron? Or does the average person, when they have Cheerios, really pour out about 2 cups of Cheerios, which is 72 milligrams of iron?
Oh, you got to go for the 2 or 3 or 4 cups of that.
Right. No, but that's done all the time. And that's just the cereal. We haven't gotten to the bread at lunch and the meal that we have at dinner. Mm-hmm. So the daily intake of iron is multiples, many multiples of what it should be. Mm-hmm. And again, it's based on this idea that we need more iron because we're anemic. And I think it's a false narrative that has been building ever since the First World War, when they did the original research about pregnant women being anemic.
Mm-hmm. Morley, we're going to take a little break right now, but I hope that you guys are enjoying this show. And if you guys want links to everything we're talking about, it will be available at extremehealthradio.com/692. And if some of this is resonating with you, you can go over to Morley's website, and I really recommend that you do. So let me ask you a few questions here. So if you're taking right now iron supplements, or if you're taking vitamin D3 supplements, or calcium, or zinc, or molybdenum supplements, or once-a-day multivitamins, it says here on his website, ascorbic acid, citrates, or citric acid, if you're taking high fructose corn syrup, or omega-6 oils, or fluoride, or silver. If you're taking any one of those supplements and what Morley's saying is resonating with you, I'd really recommend going to the Root Cause Protocol. It's rcp123.org, and you can sign up for free. He gives the whole protocol away. But we're going to dive in a little further when we get back. And like I said, if you know of anyone that you think would appreciate this kind of message, feel free to pass the show on to them. So the way we earn a living, and the way Morley earns a living is, he has some different models of what he does, but we like to sell products that we really enjoy. And one of the products that I love is our Relax Far Infrared Sauna. And I was just in there last night. I fell asleep for the majority of it, but needless to say, I was still in there. But here's Dr. Christopher Shea talking about the Relax Far Infrared Sauna, or sauna therapy in general.
How do I detoxify from plastics? I mean, you guys are using a sauna, and that's something I'd like to get. And what does the sauna do for us? A sauna is great. It's moving a number of different toxins. Remember, we talked about the mice, that if you put PCBs in there, then that made the mercury all that much worse. And sweating moves out a lot of plastics, volatiles, fat-based toxins. It's really good at moving those out and sweating those out. So that's how you're getting those out, and those are contributing to this synergistic soup inside the body. And so that's why they're good, is they're taking out a bunch of the different things in the soup.
Yeah, and here's our biological dentist, Dr. Stuart Nunley. If you guys are looking, if you're in the market for a good biological dentist, I can't recommend Dr. Nunley enough. He's just a salt of the earth guy. Prays with you before he does a procedure, and just an amazing guy. And there in Texas, his website's healthysmilesforlife.com. And I like plugging him because he's such a great guy. But anyway, here he had mercury poisoning for a lot of years, because what he was doing before he sort of woke up in his practice was he was removing people's dental amalgam fillings without any protection. So over time, he started to get worse and worse and worse, and they thought that he was coming down with a diagnosis of Lou Gehrig's disease, I think. And but listen to how he used sauna therapy for his recovery.
What I chose to do? I chose to go very, very slow as I detox. So one of the things that I did is I invested in an infrared sauna, which was huge. That was a big, big part of my healing, because interestingly enough, many times patients who have heavy metal toxicity lose the ability to sweat. And so I was one of those. I could not break a sweat. And the infrared sauna helped me to retrain my body to be able to sweat. It was a huge part of my overall detox.
Doesn't Dr. Huggins say, as long as there's more going out than what's coming in, you're okay?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think he's right. I think he's absolutely right on that.
Yeah, so we sell a number of different types of saunas on our store, biochargeme.com. And if you're watching on, if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, this video, there should be links in the description to our store, which is biochargeme.com. And but the sauna that I really recommend the most is the one that we have and use, and that's the Relax Far Infrared sauna, because for a lot of different reasons, it's very, very low EMF, but it's also portable, and you can pack it up. You can let a friend borrow it. You can store it underneath your bed if you're worried about space. You don't have to knock out a wall. It uses far infrared light, so it's really a light therapy device as well. And it's just an amazing device, and your head sits out, which I really like, because when I'm in the sauna, I like to watch documentaries and learn about this cabal that we're living in, and research and just kind of watch really, really interesting documentaries and videos and things. And so when I sit in the sauna, that's what I do, and it's just a great, great piece of equipment. So if you guys are interested, check out biochargeme.com or extremehealthradio.com/692, and I'll put a link to the sauna there. And also, sometimes before the sauna, I'll jump on my little mini rebounder. Check this out. On the flip side of that, you have to have some sort of a way of mitigating the stress that's in our life, right? So you have to have some kind of exercise. What kind of exercises do you recommend there at the Budwig Center?
Well, every room is equipped with a rebounder or a mini trampoline. So we really believe in the little mini trampoline. I noticed you're advertising that just recently on your program. We feel that's one of the safest, most gentle and effective lymphatic cleansing things that people can do. They're not expensive, really, and they can just do a few minutes, maybe 2 or 3 times a day. So lymphatic drainage using the rebounder is very important. Someone who has advanced cancer, we just have them mostly do the trampoline, and they can even sit on the trampoline if they have to and bounce up and down, but some kind of exercise to keep the lymph system moving, and so that they don't just, because if you don't do anything, your body just wears out. The body has to work, the heart has to pump.
Yeah, I love jumping up and down on a rebounder. I love working out and going hiking, going surfing, and all kinds of outdoor activities as well. But I'll take my rebounder outside. But it's a great lymphatic sort of way to flush manually your lymph system. And multiple doctors on our show have said there's more lymphatic fluid in your body than there is blood. So it's a great way to stimulate, and we can't say that it cures cancer or anything like that, but it is interesting that at many alternative natural cancer clinics, there's rebounders at every location. So it's definitely something to look at for your longevity and for your health, and it's great to do, I think, before you get in the sauna. So you jump up and down for 5 or 10 minutes, and then jump in the sauna and sweat everything out, and it's a great, great way to detoxify and sort of get on top of all this stuff, like Dr. Shade was talking about, the plastics and the chemicals that we're exposed to on a regular basis. So if you guys are looking for a good rebounder, the Bellicon is the one we use and recommend. It's a little more costly, but for me, I went through about 5 different not Bellicons, but those cheap rebounders you get at Walmart, and I have a torn ACL, and over time I just couldn't do it anymore because my knee would hurt so bad until I got the Bellicon. And that thing, you jump and it feels like you're jumping on a cloud. It increases your endorphins, your circulation, just makes you feel so good. And if you do it outside, even better. You get the full spectrum sunlight, and you can even ground yourself. Sometimes I'll do that with a little cord into the earth and listen to a podcast and jump up and down. And so it's a lot of fun. So those are available at our store, biochargeme.com. Make sure to grab one. Turn your home into a healing center. Turn your home into a place where you can become healthier instead of sicker. So make sure to do that, and everything will be available. Let me take a look here at extremehealthradio.com/692. And let me bring in Morley again really quickly, because we had an interesting comment on the sweating before. Hey, Morley, one of our previous guests mentioned that it's from his research, he's seen it's possible to sweat out iron. In his research, they've tested the iron in the sweat. Do you think that's possible? It doesn't seem to me like that would be possible, but I don't know.
Oh, no. It does come out. It's not the same as doing a blood donation, but when I first became aware that it does come out in sweat was a client of mine in Frankfurt, Germany. She was there with her husband, who was stationed in the Army, and she early 30s, and the doctor over there was convinced she was anemic, so he gave her 2 iron infusions. That's a lot of iron going into the body, and again, she's like 32, 33 years old, and she starts having night sweats, and profuse sweating. And she shared this story with me, and it was a light bulb moment. She was going to change the sheets, and she pulled back the white sheet that she had been sleeping on for a couple days, only to realize that the mattress cover was rust color. That
Really?
the metal was coming out. Yeah, absolutely. And so, yes, it does in fact come out. It's orders of magnitude different, though. It is a known way to deplete, or not deplete, but to release iron, but it's not anywhere near as effective as a blood donation.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so, because you have so much that you can get out. Do we know how much iron comes out in a typical blood donation? Is that, I guess there's a way to figure that out.
Yeah. So again, round numbers. We're talking 500 milliliters of blood. That's what the bag is,
Mm-hmm.
and the average person is going to have about half of their blood is going to have iron in it, and it's called hematocrit. Well, hematocrit is just 3 times hemoglobin. So let's say you've got, let's say you have 15 units of hemoglobin. That's 45% of your blood is going to be iron.
Oh, wow.
And so it's going to be about 240 milligrams of iron in that bag of blood. And so the first time that I gave blood, my hemoglobin was 18.3.
Oh, wow.
Well, 18.3 is a big number.
Yeah.
Right? So 18.3 times 3, that's 55% of my blood was iron. One of my students in this group's class, his was 21. So he had 63% of his blood was iron.
Oh, my goodness.
It's very, very high. And so, again, it's important that people understand that the iron dynamics are very different than what we've been trained to believe they are.
So is this iron, it's oxidizing, right? And it's combining with estrogens and heavy metals and these types of compounds, right? And causing this oxidation. Is that what's going on when it gets stored in tissue?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the iron has a very magnetic attraction to oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
And don't you find it fascinating that copper has the unique ability to harness oxygen and regulate iron, and nobody knows that? And that what's the basis of all chronic disease is energy deficiency caused by oxidative stress. So if oxygen can't be turned into water in the mitochondria to release the energy molecules called ATP, then we get what's called oxidative stress.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of making ATP, we're going to make ROS, reactive oxygen species. And we're not taught about how to optimize ATP and minimize ROS. We're just taught that, oh, you've got mitochondrial dysfunction. I'm so sorry for you.
Mm-hmm.
But not told that, in fact, what enables this process to work flawlessly is having optimal amounts of copper in your diet and minimal amounts of iron in your diet. And then you can handle the oxygen that you're breathing.
So in the alternative health world, because you talk about oxygen, there's a lot of, we interviewed years ago Ed McCabe, who wrote that book, Flood Your Body with Oxygen. And there's people doing, ozone therapies, which is a form of O3. And there's all kinds of oxidative therapies that are out there that seem to get pretty good results for people. But if someone's doing ozone or oxygen therapy right now, should they be concerned because most likely they have iron overload as well?
Well, again, I see the world a little bit differently, and I know this is going to throw some people into a tailspin. Again, I'm really goofy about oxygen. And so in order of magnitude, the most reactive element on planet Earth is fluoride. which means it likes to steal electrons. That's what reactive means. It'll steal electrons and change the structure and function of other elements. So fluoride's number 1. Oxygen is number 2. Ozone is number 3. Now, the argument that the practitioners make is that, well, we need a little bit of oxidative stress, and that's okay. And I'm like, yeah, but you're putting it in a body that really doesn't have enough bioavailable copper to begin with. So I'm very, again, I worship at the altar of the blue protein, of ceruloplasmin. And again, I'm just different that way. And I think and I, in part, take that stance to challenge the narrative and to wake people up that there's more to the story than the alternative, as you call it. And again, I don't think the object should be to kill cancer cells. That would be like taking teenagers who become drug addicts and just assassinating them. Do we do that? Is that how we treat drug addicts? I don't think so. We try to rehabilitate them, right? We try to bring them back into society. And that's a cancer cell is a teenager who's a drug addict. And what I read just yesterday, I found this fascinating. It was actually in black and white. The author said, tumors are addicted to iron. And that's a fact. They have a voracious appetite for iron. And that should make your listeners sit up and take notice like, wow, wait a minute. And so what's the cutting edge treatment for cancer therapy now? Iron chelation. Get the excess iron in the tissue that's causing all the problem out of the body and let the cells breathe again.
So many people are talking about sugar in cancer cells and how there's 6 times the amount of receptor sites on cancer cells to uptake glucose and run on that pathway. And there's a lot of other people like, Adam Bergstrom and Ray Peat, that whole community. They seem to suggest that it's not sugar that's causing the issue in terms of replication of cancer cells. Do you think that's more likely iron?
Well, again, I think it's all of the above. And so if we had a couple hours, we could really get into it. But what's really going on there is cells need oxygen to be turned into water so that energy can be released. It's a very precise mechanism that takes place. And that mechanism requires copper. It requires magnesium and copper. And magnesium plays a very important role outside of the mitochondria in what's called glycolysis. And then when we get into the mitochondria, there's 2 components to it. There's what's called the Krebs cycle, and there's something called the electron transport chain that gets coupled to what's called oxidative phosphorylation. That's a lot of big words and phrases, but at the end of the day, we can make a little bit of energy outside of the mitochondria, and we can make the bulk of the energy, 90% of the energy, is coming from inside the mitochondria that we need. And you've got to have both magnesium and copper to do it. And what happens in a cancer cell, and the one that's been studied very carefully is breast cancer cells. There's 5 times more iron in a breast cancer cell than a healthy cell next to it. And so that puts a tremendous burden on the cell to try to breathe, to be able to get access to that iron. And if the cell can't make energy, and if the cell can't recycle iron, it begins to create an oxidative storm inside the tissue. And there's a very famous concept called the Warburg Effect. It's very commonly found in cancer tissue. And that is that even though oxygen is present, the cell chooses to make energy anaerobically.
Mm-hmm.
There's only one reason for that. There's no copper to be able to activate the oxygen. And so when iron begins to exceed its optimal level, it puts tremendous metabolic pressure on copper. And that's some of the most important work that Jamie Collins has done at University of Florida, is to study this whole dynamic of what happens if we have too much iron in our diet. What happens if we have too much iron in our tissue? And he's an absolute luminary about what it does to undermine the importance and the functions that only copper can do. And so cancer is a grossly misunderstood event. And again, the object is, I don't think the object is to kill it. I think the object should be to feed it the nutrients that it needs to breathe. Go ahead.
No, it's just so interesting. Just to play a little devil's advocate, do you think that, you know how people will say with cholesterol, just because it's, in the arteries doesn't mean it's actually the cause of the heart attack?
Right.
Could that be caused, or the same, thinking process applied to iron and breast cancer cells?
No. Once you get into the literature, you're going to see that it's the oxidative stress that's really undermining the whole metabolism of the tissue.
It's so crazy because, like you mentioned in your root cause protocol, it's not just like these foods and these supplements where we're getting iron, but isn't it causing a breakdown of how to metabolize iron when people are taking like birth control pills and pharmaceuticals? This is playing a role here too, right?
Absolutely. The exposure that we have as society to iron is it's vastly greater than our great-grandparents had. Mm-hmm. People don't understand that in the last century there's been this wholesale move to expose us to iron at every level of our being. And from cradle to grave, we're being exposed to iron in ways that our ancestors never had that experience.
So 1 milligram is all we're supposed to be getting coming in through our mouth per day. Is that correct?
Correct.
And we're getting it everywhere in well water and in our water supply, and plants. Plants have a lot of iron too, don't they?
Yes, they do. And so here's an example. I came across a study recently. It was a study in 1935 in China. They were studying the impact of a high copper diet. And again, we've always got to be thinking about copper and iron. That's very important for people to connect the two. And in this particular study, they were using a high copper diet to see how it affected the individuals in the study. And the foods that they were using for the high copper diet were two: spinach and pork. Now, the pork makes perfect sense. Where we have this magical blue protein called ceruloplasmin, we have 30 units per unit of blood. That's considered good. A pig would have 140 units. The pig has a lot more of this protein. Why? Well, the job of a pig on a farm is to eat what everyone else doesn't want, which means there's a lot of histamines. And one of the enzymes that ceruloplasmin expresses is called histaminase. So it makes perfect sense that they would be a source of high copper. But the other food may surprise you. The other high copper food was spinach. And all you got to do is look up in a nutrient table today and look up and see how much copper there is in spinach, and there is none, because they've hybridized it so that it only has an uptake of iron. And I grew up with Popeye cartoons, and when Popeye needed some strength, he popped open the can, right, and it magically went down his windpipe, and then he was able to fight Brutus, and the show was over. And so, but he had that spinach to make iron, to make his muscles strong.
Right.
That's not what makes muscles strong. It's actually copper. The highest concentration of copper in the body is in our skeletal muscle. It's unbelievable how we've been sold a narrative about these minerals, and we just can't get enough iron, and oh my gosh, we got to get rid of that copper in your body. It's causing all the problems. And I'm like, wait a minute. There's 60 times more iron in our body than there is copper. They are both reactive, yes, under the right conditions. Even copper can cause oxidative stress, but it's not designed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But again, all of the training and all of the understanding about oxidative stress, no one's connecting it back to the iron except in the prestigious journals of science, where there's thousands of articles about this,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't make it into mainstream internet articles because it doesn't fit with the narrative.
We had a guest on years ago, Dr. Lawrence Wilson. You're probably familiar with him, and he does a lot of work with copper toxicity, and which is what he calls it, copper toxicity. And it's my understanding that the primary reason for that is a lack of retinol and a lack of your liver creating ceruloplasmin to be able to utilize the copper we do eat. But I mean, I hear that word so much, like copper toxicity. I'm too much copper, and I need to take some zinc to get rid of this copper or whatever else. And it's just kind of going around everywhere. I hear it almost everywhere I go in the natural health community.
So it was born out of, it was the work of Carl Pfeiffer, who was an MD, PhD. He wrote a very important book in the 60s called Mental and Elemental Nutrients. It's about 3 inches thick. And he was the guy who turned copper into a toxin and made reference to the fact that under certain conditions, copper can become unbound from ceruloplasmin, which does happen, when a toxin enters the body. And the phrase then became unbound copper, and people lost sight of the protein ceruloplasmin, and then it became, instead of calling it unbound copper, copper toxicity. But the truth of the matter is copper does not exist in an unbound state in the body. If it's not nestled in ceruloplasmin, it's going to be hanging out with albumin, it's going to be hanging out with GHK peptide, it's going to be hanging out with transcuprine, it's going to be hanging out with histidine amino acid. But copper never exists in an unbound state. And some of the most respected copper scientists, Svetlana Lutsenko in particular at Johns Hopkins, has gone on record as saying there is no unbound copper in the cell. It doesn't exist. And this narrative about copper toxicity is because practitioners have not been trained to understand the copper ceruloplasmin ratio and what's really going on there. And it's just, again, it's all about a narrative to create a mindset of fear that you've got a problem that is the exact opposite of what you think it is. And so instead of thinking that you're anemic and copper toxic, for a fact, you're drowning in iron because you have a whisper of copper in your body. And that's the whole basis of the root cause protocol, is to get people to focus on the bioavailable copper so that they can then make energy, so that they can then have proper form and function in their body. And that's the whole basis of the approach.
So it seems to me like the end goal with all of this is to be able to create energy in your mitochondria so that you can then use that energy in ways to heal the body, maybe restore yourself, kill some cells while you're sleeping, have more energy with the kids. I mean, that's the ultimate goal, right?
That is absolutely the ultimate goal. It's, again, the phrase I used, or the word I used earlier, is immuno metabolism. What precious few people were talking about in 2020 was the energy requirement to run the immuno metabolism system.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't, there are not 72 different ways to make energy in the body. There's only one, or there's the dominant, far and away dominant way, is through our mitochondria. And the cells in our body that serve an immune function, a protection function, all require ATP. That's how they think. They need to be scanning the environment, identifying what the pathogen might be, or identifying whatever the toxin is, and then they've got to say, well, given that I recognize this, now I've got to do this, this, and this. That takes thought. And we don't think about the micro level of intelligence that it takes to run our body. And the beauty of our bodies is when you've got the basic minerals and the basic vitamin complexes, and you're relying on nutrient-dense food and an ancestral diet, that you don't need to worry about whether your body's going to respond. Because it has a blueprint. It absolutely does have a blueprint. But we've been trained to believe that we're vulnerable. We've been trained to believe that we're dependent. We've been trained to believe that, oh, it's a very dangerous world out there. Keep a safe distance and what have you. And we're in the midst of a very different world than our ancestors were grown in.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Like I was telling you before the show, before we started recording, I think that your work puts such a great filter, because when you come into this natural health world, you're just sort of bombarded with taking this supplement, taking that supplement, and not really understanding the physiology of how the body works, and understanding that really it's all about one thing, and that is how can we create more energy in, I think, complex 5 or whatever it is of the mitochondria. How do we create that energy? And if we can have that energy, then we can deal with toxins, more effectively. We can deal with cancer cells that grow in our body that we don't even know, and most of the time never get diagnosed. We can deal with all kinds of things. Then you have extra energy. So if you can create sort of a filter through which you can apply some practical principles about how to create that energy, then everything sort of gets fixed down the line. And one thing that I see a lot in our Extreme Health Academy, I'm sure you get it too in your private membership, is this idea of hormones, right? And people want to focus on regulating their hormones, but it's my understanding that you can't create hormones without enzymes, and you can't create, and enzymes don't work without minerals. And so if your minerals are balanced, that's the first place to start, right? Balancing those minerals first.
Absolutely. And again, the system wants us thinking that our endocrine glands run the body. And I'm not discounting the significance and the impact of these chemicals, because they're very powerful. But what I can assure you is that every one of them is in response to oxygen and how oxygen is being metabolized in the body. The most important of which is people are very focused on their thyroid gland, right? Everybody's, well, I'm hypothyroid, or I got Hashimoto's, or whatever. And so it's good to know, well, what is the job of T3? T3 is the active form of the hormone, right? And the bulk of that hormone's existence is born out of a conversion in the liver where T4 becomes T3. It's a big deal. And if the liver's full of iron, it doesn't go as well, I can tell you that. But what's the job of T3? T3 is, in fact, an oxygen sensor. And this is the work of Jens Maytag and his team in Germany in 2012. And he's got other articles as well. But it's a very provocative article that talks about the job of T3 is to sense how's oxygen being burned in the tissue, in the mitochondria. And there's a very specific place that it likes to hang out inside the complex 4 of the mitochondria. And here's where it gets fascinating. If it senses that too much oxidative stress is being made, that there's not enough oxygen becoming water, that the oxygen is becoming superoxide or hydrogen peroxide or hydroxyl radical, what are hormones? They're signaling molecules. And it sends a signal back to the liver, and it says, we need more ceruloplasmin so we can burn the oxygen more efficiently in the tissue. Now that's a very different worldview than, oh, your numbers aren't right and you need more Synthroid or whatever. It's like people have been trained into this mindless understanding about all these different ratios, but when they don't understand the physiology of how the body makes energy, that's where the problem arises. Well, when you really, it's beautiful to see how we're designed to make energy, and anyone who's hypothyroid is retinol deficient. That's in the literature. And there's a very important protein called TTR, Transthyretin Protein. What's it transporting? Oh, yeah, it's transporting T4 and retinol. Oh, yeah, and if the retinol is not there, it creates a mess, and that's the start of atherosclerosis. See, these are good things for people to know, but it's different than the mainstream, and it's a little bit more complicated, but I actually think it's more exciting to find out what's the root cause of all this confusion. And it's this, the confusion is that the thyroid runs the body, and it doesn't. Thyroid's very important. It happens to be in a spot in our body where I think it's every 13 minutes, all of the blood is going past that part of the body, but right by the thyroid gland. It's an enormous cinch point in our circulation. And why we were designed that way, I don't know. It's beautiful. But the signaling between the thyroid gland and the pituitary and the hypothalamus is very, very important. Again, all responding to the status of oxygen in the body. And if the figure that, or the marker that people are very concerned about is TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, make sure that the thyroid's doing its job, right? Coming out of the pituitary. Well, that's the major. The general is up in the hypothalamus is called TRH, thyroid regulating hormone. Oh, that's a different beast. And guess what? TRH is copper dependent. And if TRH is not working right, if the general is not able to express itself right, then the pituitary starts screaming at the thyroid. And that's why the TSH rises. It's a sign of copper deficiency. Again, it's in the literature, but you have to dig for it. And so there are multiple narratives out there. One is a story, and the other is science. And I happen to enjoy the science side of it and try to make it available to people who are interested in knowing the truth.
It's interesting when you start looking at different aspects of health and people's health challenges when you apply what you're talking about, because you can apply it to so many things. I remember one time you were talking about, what was it, the MTHFR, and a lot of people saying they have this issue, and you were saying that the T there is transferase, which is a copper dependent enzyme, I think you said. And, that has a lot to do, again, with, being copper deficient and retinol deficient. But people follow these things and they say, oh, I'm MTHFR, I've got this autoimmune disease, but not realizing how minerals run the show,
Well, they really do. And there are over 200 methyl transferase enzymes. And I've studied 10 of them very carefully, and all 10 require copper. So I don't have time to study all 200. I don't think Mother Nature plays dice. No. So I think if 10 are one way, wouldn't it seem reasonable to assume that they're all going to work the same way? And that, I think that logic holds. But again, we are in a country, especially, that is dependent upon people being sick, and the healthcare system is built around sick humans, because there's no money in a healthy human and there's no money in a dead human. So we want sick humans who are dependent on the chemistry that comes out of the system. And it's just, again, I lived in that world. I know what that world is like. And that works for some people, but it doesn't work for everyone. And so I just decided to create an alternative approach, never imagining that it would be this fascinating, never imagining that it would be this important. And it's like, I'm not trying to save humanity. I'm just trying to save a very small percentage of people who really are looking for what is the truth of our physiology and what can I do to take control of it. Because to me, that's the ultimate expression of health, is wanting to be responsible for your well-being and taking the initiative to bring it about. And so I'm just, if you will, I'm democratizing the health process.
I like that. So I know you have to leave in a couple minutes. So in closing, just let people know, if this is their first time hearing you, let people know where they can find you. And you have so many cool things. You have your own awesome private community, and you have a training situation you have going with, different people. You have all kinds of cool stuff going on, right?
Yeah, the website, as you mentioned, and thank you for sharing that, it's rcp123.org, and that's sort of the gateway into the protocol, as you noted. There's testimonials there. There's a lot of information. There's 81 posts on iron toxicity. For anyone who's at all, if this conversation has piqued their curiosity, just look up the research. I think, and within each article, you're going to have anywhere from 3 to 7 scientific articles folded into a topical construct. But you can also join the RCP community through that website, and then you can also sign up for the 14-week training program that we have, and we do that 2 times a year formally, beginning of the year and start of summer. And then, of course, there's the Facebook group, which you mentioned. The Magnesium Advocacy Group is one group, and then there's another page that's devoted to just the RCP page. There's a Magnesium Advocacy Facebook group, and there's there's an RCP page, and they're both just growing like gangbusters. And of course, there's also all sorts of sister communities, Mag Mommies and Magnesium for Pets, and there are about 8 or 9 different groups that are out there that have all been spawned by this whole process.
So what is the difference between your membership community and the 14-week? Like, what would be the difference in people going through that?
The membership community is like $10 a month, $100 a year, and we have meetings every other week. We have webinars, we have Q&As, and that gives people a chance to dig a little deeper. The training is a different beast altogether. It's a very intense 14 weeks. It's a couple grand, and it's weekly classes. There's a lot of case material and reading material. So it's when people are really ready to take the real deep dive to understand this. And it's really designed for both practitioners, people who are licensed already, to really understand how the body really works. Myself, or like you, who say, I just want to help people. I want to be a coach. And that's really, it's serving both sides. And then there's a third type of person who goes through the training, and that's people who just want to help their family members. They just want to learn the ins and outs of it. And so this latest group number 13, we have 65 new students, and we have 10 people coming back from other classes. Oh, wow. And we anticipate that that's going to be the norm going forward, probably about 60 to 70 people new, and then there will always be alumni that want to do a refresher course.
That's awesome.
We've trained about 350 people.
That's awesome. And also, if people just want to work with someone, I think you have like a directory too, where people can find people that will work with them locally or via chat or something, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a directory worldwide. And again, we've got hundreds of people who've been through the training. So it's just a chance for people to connect with with that support if they want that.
That's awesome. Well, Morley, I know you got to go, but we'll have to do a show on vitamin D. I would love to talk with you about this because you and I have chats about, what's going on in the world and stuff like that. It would be kind of fun to chat about stuff that's not even health related one day. If we could do that, that'd be fun.
That would be great. I'd love it. That'd be a lot of fun.
All right. So what are you going to do the rest of today? Anything fun?
I am working on editing my book, which I promised to the publisher by the end of the month.
Oh, wow.
And I'm also working on a couple products, both copper focused. One is for vegans and one is for the paleo crowd. And I'm looking forward to that, helping people recuperate. And so those are 2 big projects I've got going that I really got to get them completed by the end of the month, just so I can have a life.
Awesome. Well, Morley, have a great rest of your day. And thanks again for being on the show. That was so much fun. I appreciate it so much.
Well, I really appreciate your support. You're a prince among men because of your fascination, your devotion, and your real active interest in this. And I really appreciate the chance to have these conversations.
Well, I think you're at the forefront of it all. So yeah, you're welcome anytime. And I don't know if you're on the schedule, but if you're not, feel free to get on the schedule.
I think I've done that, but I'm going to double check and make sure. But I think we're set up for every other month through the end of the year. But I'll double check that.
Awesome. All right, Morley, thank you again, my friend.
Okay, you take care.
All right, have a good one.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye. All right, there you go, guys. Morley Robbins. I hope you enjoyed that. What did you think? Did any of that rub you the wrong way? Did you say to yourself, my doctor says that I'm anemic or I've got iron, I need more iron? And did you hear that and think, Morley's crazy? I don't know about what he's saying. Curious what your thoughts are. So we're going to do a little break right now, and I want to kind of break things down a little bit. But here is a really cool product that we love, and it's all about molecular hydrogen. And when we get into like oxidation, truly being the cause of disease, I can't say that this cures anything, but this is a really cool product that we have. It's called the Molecular Hydrogen Machine. It's called the AquaCure, and it's available now on our website. And you can breathe the gas and bubble the hydrogen into your water and drink hydrogen-rich water. Listen to Nathan Walls talk about this. It's pretty cool.
Getting healthy sun exposure can do more than any supplement. I do take some supplements. Most of the supplements I take are on the short term. When I fly, I do molecular hydrogen because that's really a good quencher of free radicals, especially a lot of the free radicals made from EMFs. And when you fly, you get exposed to a whole bunch of EMFs. But here's a hack, because molecular hydrogen is not super cheap, but your body also makes molecular hydrogen. And the best way to do that is by getting infrared light on your gut. So that light penetrates into your gut, and your bacteria are able to liberate or pull out molecular hydrogen from your food.
That was Nathan Walls. I like promoting good people. His website's journeytooptimalhealth.com, and I'll put a link to it if you want to learn more about him. But this is what he's talking about, molecular hydrogen, really fascinating. And here is our good friend Brian Hoyer. Almost forgot his name real quick. Brian Hoyer, who came to our house and did an EMF assessment, which I'll tell you about in just a second. But here he is talking about molecular hydrogen as well.
And then there's other mitigation strategies that I'm working on for outdoors, and there's different things you can do to mitigate some of the damage. One of the things that Dr. Mercola recommends is molecular hydrogen, and that's actually been shown to basically mitigate 80% of the damage of free radical peroxynitrate, which stimulates those, which is created from the stimulation of those voltage-gated calcium ion channels. And so drinking molecular hydrogen when you're acutely exposed to those frequencies can help.
Yeah, so Brian Hoyer is an awesome guy, and I like what he's talking about here. And molecular hydrogen is just really fascinating and unique substance. So what it basically is, if you're wondering, is it's the world's smallest antioxidant in the known universe. It's 400 times smaller than vitamin C, 700 times smaller than CoQ10. So when you breathe this gas, and in George's machine, the AquaCure has this option of doing Brown's gas, which is sort of a step up from regular molecular hydrogen. But because of the particle size and how small it really is, it helps to repair the DNA. And we had, what's the guy's name? Tyler LeBaron from the Molecular Hydrogen Institute talking on our show. And if you want to watch that show, it's available on our store, biochargeme.com, underneath the this hydrogen machine. But basically, it has the ability to repair your mitochondrial DNA and your DNA itself. And it can get into the brain, and it reduces oxidation and rust. And this is whole part of Morley's protocol, is reducing and bringing down that oxidation that's causing all this disease. And there's thousands of studies on this thing. And so what's really cool about this is that you can breathe this gas. You can breathe it while you're sleeping. You can breathe the gas through a nasal cannula, which is what I do while you're doing the rebounder. You can, if you're sitting at the computer, you can breathe this gas all day long. You take it to work, and you can breathe it all day long at work. Your coworkers will think you're crazy, but I mean, I don't know what's crazier, breathing molecular hydrogen when there's over 1,000 studies on the benefits of it, or taking a flu shot or something, or COVID shot. And so this is really cool. It's got a lifetime warranty. guarantee, 100% satisfaction guarantee. So if you are not satisfied, you can send it back within a year. George is just a really good guy, and you can make hydrogen-rich water as well, so you don't have to take those tablets. And this is a really cost-effective way to do this. And we have a coupon code for 10% off this machine. So if you want to invest in your health, there's a reason why molecular hydrogen is the number one treatment they're using in China for COVID-19 is molecular hydrogen, according to George Wiseman. And it's a fascinating substance, and it really gets down to the nitty-gritty of our oxidative stress and bringing that down. So look into this AquaCure machine. Listen to the shows we've done with George Wiseman on this, and really, really fascinating machine. And also, here's a really cool product too that we like and we use a lot. In fact, every single night when we go to bed, check it out.
I just heard those devices that you had during the break, by the way, and I actually want to add to that because that's really cool stuff. I actually have the Magnetico sleep pad myself. I've got the 20 Gauss. It actually is really important. And what's happening is with the Earth, according to research and some pretty good science, that the poles are actually wandering. Instead of being sort of perfectly aligned and opposite of each other, there's multiple poles on the north and south, and they're actually wandering around. And basically what that does is it decreases magnetism around the Earth, but it does so in an uneven way, in an undistributed way. So it's not exactly uniform around the planet. What's happening is we are getting extra solar energies coming to the Earth. So we're actually seeing like UVC is now increasing on the planet because of our magnetic field. Our magnetic shield is not as protective. So it's really interesting stuff what's happening as we're moving into new parts of the galaxy, and we're getting new energies and all this stuff is changing. So I actually have a Magnetico sleep pad.
So in the 1960s, there's a doctor, Robert O. Becker. I don't know if you've heard of him. He was an oral surgeon, but he studied salamanders, and he was able, check this out, he was able to regrow the limbs of salamanders with positive, negative electric and magnetic stimulation, which is crazy, right? So we really are electrical and magnetic beings, and this is why 5G is so, and just Wi-Fi and dirty electricity in your walls, this is why this stuff is places such a stress on your body. Martin Pall was on our show, Professor Martin Pall, and he was studying the effects of dirty electricity and Wi-Fi and WLAN on our cell membranes. And he was saying that basically it breaks down the cell membrane, and you have what he said like 1,000 times more calcium getting inside the cell than there should be. And so there's this process that we have when we sleep called the glymphatic system. And, I talked earlier about the lymphatic system, which is that lymphatic fluid you have running all throughout your body. But you have a glymphatic system, and that is the process of your cerebral spinal fluid coming out of the brain and being detoxified in this whole system that happens when you sleep. And this is one of the ways where we can detoxify heavy metals is by using one of these Magnetico sleep pads. And Dr. Bondley, who's been on the show, has done a lot of research on this and combining different supplements and using the Magnetico and sleeping in this magnetic field. So I really am a big proponent of this. I think it's something that you should look into. And what I talk about in our academy is that we should focus on our environment first, because we really are, like, our health is the product of our environment. If you're living in a sick environment, if you're stressed, if you're constantly fighting with your boyfriend or girlfriend or your kids, or if you're constantly worried about work and stress, and then you come home and there's more fighting and there's toxins in your carpet and there's mattresses off-gassing and there's EMF everywhere and there's toxic blue light. I mean, this is just a constant barrage of stress. And so this is why I always like to say, let's focus on the areas of your life where you spend the most time. And where you sleep is 1/3 of your life, right? So focus on your sleep. And so this is why I like optimizing your sleep and starting there first. And then after that, starting with where you work. That's why I recommend the Green Wave Dirty Electricity filters where you sleep. You can get those on our store as well, biochargeme.com, and putting those around where you sleep and where you work, and then optimizing your bed, making sure you have a Magnetico. So if you're worried about Wi-Fi, if you're worried about all these types of things, the Magnetico is something that I would look at. In fact, I have, because I have it. So we actually have to upgrade. We have the 10 Gauss right now, but I want to upgrade to the 20 Gauss. So this is a really, really great. There's over 2,000 magnets in the pad. I think it's like 75 pounds. So it's super heavy. So you may need if you buy one, you may need some people to help you install it. But I really recommend sleeping in this magnetic field, and it helps your electrons spin faster and all kinds of plus minus switching polarities. It's pretty geeky when you get into it. But yeah, check these out. The Magnetico sleep pad, they're available on biochargeme.com or extremehealthradio.com/692. And I hope you guys enjoyed that show. That was pretty fascinating stuff. And, you know, with Morley's work, it's really interesting because he does go against the grain of a lot of people. You know, a lot of people are saying to take vitamin D. A lot of people are saying that you should take iron supplements. A lot of people are saying that you should take calcium supplements. A lot of people are saying that you should take omega-3 oils and all these types of things. And, you know, this is one of the things that, you know, he mentions. You know, zinc is another thing that people are saying now that you should take. And it's, you know, all of these things, as well as like ascorbic acid, vitamin C, you know, unless you're using whole food forms of vitamin C, what he's saying is you have this dynamic interplay between oxygen, iron, and copper. And unless you have retinol, which helps load that copper into the ceruloplasmin protein, I still would like to know what those atoms are doing in that protein, though. I don't know what, I don't think he really answered that, but I still would like to know that. But fascinating stuff. And if you cannot get copper to be loaded into that ceruloplasmin protein, then that protein is going to dump out, or it's not even going to be available. And so when you take vitamin D3, you take iron, you take zinc, you take ascorbic acid, and chemicals like pharmaceutical drugs, it's my understanding, I may be wrong about this, but it's my understanding that it causes that ceruloplasmin protein to fold to the right instead of to the left. And you know how you always see those things that say L-glutamine or L-this, L-tryptophan, and all these types of things? That's because it's supposed to fold to the left. It's my understanding. And if it folds to the right, what happens is that this copper will leak out of it, and then it becomes what he calls sort of unbound, even though he talked about that. And so think of it like, I like this analogy is really good. I think it helps me understand is, you know, you're going to work, but you're getting on a city bus to get to work, right? And you're sitting there at the bus stop waiting for the bus to come, and you're a copper molecule, right? So you need that bus to come, which is ceruloplasmin, right? So you get on the bus and then you go to work, right? So then you arrive at your destination, and then when you arrive, you can do your job, right? And so all of these downstream processes happen as a result of you being at your job and doing what you're supposed to be doing, right? All these supplemental things happen as a result of that. But what happens is that you get on the bus and then the bus crashes, right? And that would be the equivalent of taking calcium or taking zinc or taking molybdenum. I can't even say that. Iron or any of these types of things, ascorbic acid. And so now the bus is traveling down the street and full of these, you know, copper, and then it crashes, right? And so when the bus crashes, it's not like, oh, the bus crashes, right? The bus is supposed to take you to work. So now you got two problems. You can't be at work to do your job, right? So all of these other things don't get done as a result of you not being at your work. But now you're on a freeway or you're on a city street and you're blocking traffic, right? So now you're blocking traffic. So now you're preventing all the other substances and compounds from doing their job, right? So you're inhibiting other biological processes by the fact that you now are in a place where you shouldn't be. So that's kind of like how I like to look at ceruloplasmin and copper, is that there's all kinds of things that happen as a result of being fully loaded into that protein or not. And so this is why it's really important to make sure that you're getting enough retinol to be able to load into that ceruloplasmin protein. And you know, another thing we didn't get into today, which I think would be really interesting, is we've talked a lot about light and how light affects the red blood cell and how light affects these different minerals, and they certainly do, which is something we didn't even discuss today. And so when you really get down to like people's health, I think it's pretty quite simple. You know, it's fixing your environment wherever you spend time, and that means your EMF, your mold in your house. We did a whole show on mold. Toxicities coming from your bed, from your carpet, from paints, from plastics, you know, it's just fixing your environment. So you look at the different areas of your environment and what's wrong with it. Most homes have wires in the walls that are not fully insulated, so they're emitting magnetic and electrical frequencies. So you have EMF everywhere. You have blue light toxicity exposure, right? To all indoor lighting is going to be toxic. And then you have chemicals, then you have bad air. So it's fixing your environment, right? Pretty simple, you know? And then it's balancing your minerals, what Morley's talking about. Making sure that you're decreasing your amounts of iron. Like Adam Bergman says, polyunsaturated fatty acids, I'm with him on that, and increasing your copper. And there's certain key supplements you can take to do all this, and making sure your minerals are balanced. But then also making sure that you're doing things in life that are going to be beneficial to you. Like, are you doing things in life that resonate with you? Or are you constantly fighting? Are you constantly in stress? Are you constantly unsatisfied with where you are? Making sure you're doing the work that you're doing and you feel fulfilled. You have people in your life that support you and that love you, and that you are honoring your mom and dad, and you're blessing, those that came after you, and you're honoring those that came before you. These are all things that are really important when it comes to health. And this is something we didn't even talk about with Morley today, but it's all part of the puzzle. I was talking with Kate the other day, and it seems like everyone who comes on our show thinks that their philosophy is the answer to everything, right? Whether it's a chiropractor, whether it's a EMF person or a light person or a mineral person, or just anything. And I think it's really important to put all the pieces together. And I know Morley does too, and these other people do too. But the focus of their work is on one thing, right? And so it's our job as people taking in this information is how do we put something together that supports our health. And it's really important to make sure that you're doing the right things, because if you're doing everything Morley's talking about, but you're constantly fighting with people and you're living under, next to a Wi-Fi tower and you're fighting with your kids, it's like, that's not going to be a good situation, right? So you got to make sure that you're drinking enough water, getting enough sleep, reducing stress, doing all the smart, normal things. And, and then health results, your body constantly is fighting to be in homeostasis. Your body wants to heal, it's just a question of whether or not we're going to work with the body or against it. And that's why I like Morley's work, is because, he's talking about things that actually move the needle. Because you can take a lot of supplements, you can do a lot of dietary things, but, ultimately it's putting tremendous amounts of stress on the body, depriving yourself of food, fasting, and all these types of things, reducing sugar. Sugar is not what you think it is. And, there's a lot of people that are talking about this now. And so, is it sugar or is it lactic acid? Is it polyunsaturated fatty acids? Is it excess iron? So these are all things that it's just important. And in our academy, I'd really recommend, if I were you, I would join our Extreme Health Academy and I would join Morley's program, because, they dive deeper into it and there, at least Morley's work. But in our academy, we put all the pieces together, and so this month we're doing a blood donation, and many of our members are joining me on that. And I donate 4 times a year at the change of every season. And next month, we're going to be focusing on liver health. I'm not really a fan of doing cleanses in as much as focusing on a certain organ and supporting that organ to do its job better. So we're going to be doing a liver cleanse in April. And here's another key thing too. So there's a lot of people in the natural health community talking about vitamin D, right? And how low vitamin D levels are associated with all causes, disease. And, Dr. Cruz is talking about that. And all these people are talking about vitamin D levels. Well, how do we optimize our liver's ability to store vitamin D, right? So if you're thinking about, like, this is how we need to think. Right now it's, what is it? It's March 19th, 2021, right? So you should start thinking about how you can, if you're living in the Northern Hemisphere, how you can upregulate your liver health so that you can absorb and store as much vitamin D as you can, so that when fall and winter comes, you don't get sick, right? Because who knows what's going to happen with this big C, little v thing. Are they going to release the real strain of it and really have people get sick, or what's going to happen, So if you want vitamin D, you need to be getting it from the sun and not taking it in pill form, and upregulating your liver health so that you can store the vitamin D that you accumulate in the morning sun during the summer months and spring months in the Northern Hemisphere. So this is how you need to think. And this is like being tied to nature, right? Dr. Cruz talks about this all the time. And I don't think that it's possible to be 100% healthy or getting to your full genetic blueprint and potential without being tied to nature. And so this is why it's really important to spend more time outside, and obviously not go overboard, but making sure to tie yourself back to nature and to the circadian cycles and to the rhythms and cycles of the seasons and, how the earth operates. And the more we disconnect from that, the sicker we become. And the more we get into these electrified cages that we live in called homes and buildings, the sicker we become. So this is what I'm working with people inside our academy. So we're going to be working next month in April on liver health as a community. And I'm inside the Extreme Health Academy Zoom rooms every Friday morning. Dr. Bergman, who is also part of the Extreme Health Academy, is live on the third Sunday of every month. We do live workshops every single month. We kind of just drill down. We did one with our biological dentist. We did one with Morley Robbins with all kinds of slides and got really geeky and deep. It was like a 3-hour webinar. We've done one on cancer. We've done one on light, one on minerals. I mean, we do live workshops every single month where you can ask questions in Zoom. And Kate is doing twice a month, the first and third Wednesday of every month at 10 a.m. Pacific. She's live in there doing the Women's Wellness Hour. And we just have a lot of fun. And the forums are just going crazy. And the forums are awesome. And so I love interacting with everyone in the forums. And then we have our courses and we have everything else we have going on. We have the, what's really cool is we're putting all our radio shows there too. But I have the Healthy Organ Guide. That's coming up very soon. That's going to be published. We're going to be releasing all kinds of stuff from every perspective on every organ of the body and how to upregulate each and every organ. Things to avoid, things to add in, supplements, protocols, all kinds of cool things for every single organ. So if you have issues with dementia, for example, your brain, you just go there and check out everything that we've learned about the brain and how to optimize that, as well as liver and every other organ of the body. So that's coming soon. We have the yearly self-care guide. So every single month, if you're looking to try to figure out like how to take care of your health, every month we have a different thing that we do as a group. And we're going to be doing challenges here pretty soon, some really cool challenges that we're going to be doing as a group, which is also really fun. So there's so much going on. So if you guys want to join the Extreme Health Academy, which I recommend you do, go to extremehealthacademy.com and enter the code EHR. That's EHR14. You get a free 14-day trial. I'm in the forums every single day, so come say hello to me. And if you have any questions for me, this is a place where I can interact with you and help you. Because as you can imagine, with worldwide listenership, I can't respond to every email. But if you become a member, I can definitely help you. So I'm in the forums every single day, and it's a fun place for me to interact with you and help you with your health challenges, be a guide there. So I hope you enjoyed that show. Go over to rcp123.org and sign up and get Morley Robbins' root cause protocol that he gives away for free. Join there and get his root cause protocol. Just put your name, I think it's down at the bottom, and join up there and get his root cause protocol. So that's available. I'll put a link to everything we talked about. So I've got the book that he mentioned, the Magnesium Miracle that he mentioned, as well as Iron Metabolism book, as well as the Mental and Elemental Nutrients, Physician's Guide to Nutrition and Healthcare, and then Brian Hoyer's website and Nathan Walls' website and all that good stuff. So I'll put everything available at extremehealthradio.com/692, which will be the show page for this. 692 is the show number for today's show. And always got to do a little plug for our upcoming shows. So next Friday we have Stuart Nunley, Dr. Nunley. Friday after that, Cass Ingram talking about Big C, Little V safety, VAERS, Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. Wow, that's going to be a good one. Dr. Michelle Lamassa Schrader on recall healing. Then we're going to have Jason Prawl on again. Ancient Methods of Healing Body, Mind, and Soul. A lot of cool stuff. A lot of really cool stuff. And then we're going to have Nicholas Pinnell on the show talking about his product with Brian Hoyer on mitigating EMF. Really cool. So a lot of cool stuff coming up. So make sure to subscribe to the show. And one more thing that we just launched too inside the Academy is that all of our content is video based. So we've just released an audio podcast. It's a private podcast only for Extreme Health Academy members. I think we have over 1,000 hours of content, from live workshops to Zoom rooms to courses to challenges to so many different things that we're doing. And as a member, you get access to the audio versions of that on the private podcast. So you have to become a member. And then if you pause or cancel your subscription, you'll lose access to it. It's just the way the software works. But we just launched that last week. So pretty cool stuff. So I think that's about it, guys. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your support. It really means a lot to me. There'll be links to the Relax Far Infrared Sauna, the Bellicon, the AquaCure, and the Magnetico at our show page today, extremehealthradio.com/692. And for those of you that shop on Amazon, I'm trying to shop less and less on Amazon these days. But if you want to shop on Amazon and support us, if you're going to shop on Amazon, please support somebody. Because at least make it worth it, because this whole globalist thing and Jeff Bezos and all this kind of stuff, I don't like supporting that. But if you're dead set on shopping on Amazon, you can still support the show. So, at least support somebody. So if you do shop there, go to extremehealthradio.com, our homepage, scroll to the bottom, and then just click over there. And then nothing changes for you, but you get to support the show, and at least it makes it something good coming out of it other than you getting, good products and stuff. So that's one way to support us. Also, there's a lot of people that support us on Patreon as well. So thank you guys for doing that. If you just want to send us $5 or $10 a month or $1 a month, a lot of people do that. So we appreciate that so much. And again, thank you for sharing the show too. That really means a lot to us with the amount of censorship going on these days. That really is it's a big deal. Big deal. So I appreciate your support so much. You guys are awesome. Thank you again. You guys, without you guys, we couldn't do what we're doing. So, your help and support is tremendous. So we really appreciate you listening and sharing our content and all of that. So thank you again. You guys are awesome. Again, this was episode 692. So we'll put the links to everything over there, and have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week.
No material on this blog is intended to suggest that you should not seek professional medical care. Always work with qualified medical professionals, even if you educate yourself in the field of live food, nutrition, and alternative medicine. I'm not a doctor, nor am I offering readers medical advice of any kind. None of the information offered here should be interpreted as a diagnosis of any disease, nor an attempt to treat or prevent any disease or condition. While information in this blog is discussed in the context of numerous conditions, it can be dangerous to take action based on any information in this blog or to start any health program without first consulting a health professional. The content found here is for informational purposes only and is in no way intended as medical advice, as a substitute for medical counseling, or as a treatment/cure for any disease or health condition, and nor should it be continued as such. Always work with a qualified healthcare professional before making any changes to your diet, prescription drug use, lifestyle, or exercise activities. This information is provided as is, and the reader/viewer assumes all risks from the use, non-use, or misuse of this information.